So I got to rewatch The Invisible Man last night with my father, who was dying to see this movie. So we checked it out, and I thought it'd be fun to do a spoiler discussion on it since I just watched it last night. I did do a spoiler-free review on it, so if you haven't seen it, go check that out instead. But I'm gonna get into the spoilers of this film because I do think it's a pretty great flick, and definitely a unique twist on this story. So we've seen the Invisible Man story done in a multitude of different ways. I mean, from the original to even the John Carpenter's memoir of the Invisible Man with Chevy Chase, or you got Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon, or Christian Slater in the second one. We've seen Invisible Men movies plenty of times. Now, typically, it's because of some kind of science experiment went wrong, and his body becomes invisible, much to his chagrin. But in this version, we get a science fiction take on this as far as the technology side of things, where this guy has, spoilers, people, faked his own death, and he has created a suit because he is a leader in optics research. He's created a suit that makes him completely invisible to the naked eye. Now, I think that what really sets this film apart from others like it, not only is the story different because this is more dealing with an abusive household, and I want to talk on that for a little bit too, but I'll get back to that in a minute. But what we have in this movie is an absolutely incredible performance by our lead actress here, Elizabeth Moss. And she's seriously one of the best actresses working right now, and we are lucky to have gotten her for this film. Her performance in this is just excellent. Just absolutely excellent. And it's kind of heartbreaking to watch because it absolutely makes sense on why everyone would be reacting the way they're reacting to her. She sounds like a crazy person. The way that this guy plays his mind games in this movie, where he does everything so perfectly to set her up to look like the crazy one, which she says in the movie, this is what he does. This is what he does. This is an extremely manipulative man. And he does what he does so well. Like, he waits just that right moment for this young girl to put her head down to where he punches her in the face to make it look like she's done it. And of course, who the hell is going to believe that there's an invisible man in the room who is your ex-husband, who has mentally traumatized you? And of course, everybody's going to be thinking, this chick snapped. She was abused by her husband so much, and then the weight of his death and all of that just broke her, and now she's losing her fucking mind. And of course, the most shocking scene, one of the most, I shouldn't say the most shocking, but one of the most shocking scenes of the year, and I think this is kind of universal for most people, is the scene at the dinner with her sister. That shit came out of nowhere and was shocking. My theater audibly gasped in unison, and I think every person I've talked to, if we're talking spoilers, that's the first thing they want to mention, because it's so well crafted. It's so surprising. It's so jarring. The way that it's done too, it's done so subtly, but also so brutally. Like, if that makes any sense. It's almost like how do I say this? When the scene happens, it's not this, usually with scenes like that in these kinds of movies, there's this loud, jarring music and something jumping at the screen and something that's super shocking. But it's like quiet and reserved, but it's also shocking and kind of bombastic at the same time. It's really just a very unsettling moment in the movie. Where you're just like, you kind of just look around like, that fucking just happened? What, that just happened? You know, her sister's sitting there and just bleeding out from the neck. Like, and that's another thing. There's no real, like, you know, gory, graphic, crazy kills in the movie by any means. So it doesn't really deliver in that way, but it never really needed to. I mean, there's just throat slittings and, you know, knocking guards out. I mean, they could have had a little more fun with it. I probably would have liked it more, to be honest. But I think it actually kind of makes sense to his character. He's really only there to antagonize her. Like, he's only really there to fuck with her mind, to punish her. Like everybody else, like everybody he's punishing in the movie, everyone he's hurting in the movie is only in an attempt to hurt her. Like, he doesn't seem to have any desire to hurt anybody else in the movie. Like, he does, but it's all in an attempt to hurt her. Like, he has he's vindictive against her specifically. She left him, he can't handle it, and he's going to use every single thing in his arsenal against her. So when he's like knocking guards out and whatnot, there's, you know, not a lot of brutality being committed to these guys. He could be breaking these guys' necks, pulling the gun, blowing all of their heads off, you know, like some total psychopathic killer. But that's not his aim in the game. Like, his aim in this game is to just get under her skin, is to get her to come home, you know? I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess I could see some flaws in the logic, just because, okay, it's a prison she's in. It's like a psychiatric prison that she's in, or psychiatric ward, whatever it is. There's cameras, and his suit is flashing in and out. And when her cop friend is talking to her, he's like, well, you know, we have some corroboration from witnesses that say they saw something odd, and that should be enough, and this and that. And it's like, their their testimony, and they saw something odd. Okay, there should be cameras everywhere. Maybe he disengaged them. I could accept that if they were to say that. They should have addressed it. If they did, I completely missed it, but I don't think they did. I've seen it twice now. But yeah, because he's an optics dude, maybe he has an ability to take out all the cameras, whatever. So then, but because he has an invisible suit and he doesn't think that he's going to be seen anyway, he would have wanted the cameras to see, because that's kind of the setup here, and that's what ends up getting used against him in the end, obviously. But so clearly he would have been caught on camera for sure. Though, that being said, in the end, his brother takes the fall for it. So he doesn't really care if that happens. It's just, I found that odd that he was like, oh, we have testimony and this and that. And it's like, you don't have camera footage of a guy going in and out, and everyone's saying it's weird that they saw something odd. You clearly saw a guy in a fucking suit. I mean, you might not understand the technology you just saw, but you clearly saw what you saw. So I found that a tad odd, and that's nitpicky, but still. And then the whole idea that she's pregnant, and recently after his death with clearly his kid, that would be the easiest way to determine it's him. Like, that would have been the absolute easiest way to be like, although I guess you could argue that the brother somehow procured it from his brother and inseminated her while she was sleeping, and it was all him all along. It would be interesting to me to, you know, think maybe it was him, the brother, the entire time, and he really did kidnap his brother, and he really was a victim of his brother. But he was such a piece of shit throughout the story we're told about him through her, that I'm under the belief that he didn't deserve to live anyways, and so his demise is warranted regardless. So even if you were to argue, well, maybe the brother did it, maybe the brother really did do it the entire time, maybe they staged it together Maybe they didn't. Whatever. It was him from day one. Wouldn't matter. They both should have died anyway, so fine. So I'm fine with her getting her vengeance in the end, even if someone was to argue maybe it wasn't him. I mean, clearly it was. He kind of comes in and he gives her the wink, like, surprise, and then she flips it on him by slitting his throat. I think that another thing, and I said I'd come back to this earlier. Another thing that this film does so well is in a time where social commentaries and agendas are being pushed into film and people are rolling their eyes and they feel like they're being oversaturated with opinion pieces and propaganda as they may see it. You got a film like this which deals with domestic abuse and that whole narrative of men are awful and women are victims. That storyline has been used for many, many, many years. I mean, those kinds of movies have been made forever. So anybody who's just now realizing that and now seeing them and saying all those films have an agenda, I mean, then you're going to have to say that movies 20, 30, 40 years ago had that agenda too. So I think that's unfair. But there's clearly some movies like a Black Christmas or something recently where there is clearly an agenda. There is clearly... Like, it is so man-hating, and it's almost offensive. It is offensive. It's just like, come on now. But I think what this film does really well, and I think the reason why something like this works and a Black Christmas doesn't at all, is because it balances its characters well. Like, you have the shitty male characters in this who are taking advantage of and abusing Elizabeth Moss in this movie, yes. But then you've got her guy friend she lives with, the cop, who's awesome, by the way. And he's such a good friend, and he's such a strong male character for good that wants to help, that is there for her, and never, never comes on to her, is never like expecting something for his help, or he's never creepy with her, he's never weird for her. He's always he's always well put together, like in any one of his scenes, like the way that he tries to be there for her, but also he's like trying to stay rational, and he's also trying to protect his daughter. Like, I think he's a really well-balanced character. Like when his daughter has been punched in the face, and of course he loves and knows this woman, but he's like, look, this is like my main focus right now has got to be to protect my family, to protect my daughter. And it's like, man, I feel that, even if like I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is impossible, she would never do that, but here's my daughter, and she's sitting there with a fucking like bloody nose, and she's scared, and she's like, she hit me. And this friend of mine is kind of compromised emotionally, and she's already had a few moments where it's questionable. Of course your brain would be going to straight protection mode, but it never felt forced. It was never one of those things. I've seen movies like this plenty of times where you watch it and there's that moment where everyone turns on the character and it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't fit. It's like forced, and you're like, oh, come on. These people wouldn't immediately turn on her like that and this and that. He doesn't fully turn on her. I mean, he's there for her throughout the entire film. And, towards the end, I also kind of thought it was silly when he came out of it after he'd been beaten up and his daughter had been, assaulted, and he had seen what he had seen. He kind of came out of that like, well, essentially saying stuff like, yeah, like I kind of saw something weird too, and whatnot. And it was like, what are you talking about? The guy's laying dead in your room. It was because he said, if the machine worked, it doesn't anymore. What do you mean if it worked? You were assaulted by someone who was invisible. It worked. So it was the phrasing, it was the wording of it. I was like, I don't know. It was almost like he was still in denial, but I guess because the technology is so beyond anything we've ever seen, it's hard to accept. And because this plot is so sinister and outlandish, maybe it's too much to grasp. But I don't know. The wording on some of that, I was like, what? Like, you should been like, holy shit, man, you were right. I'm so sorry, and that's crazy that he had that stuff, and but obviously. better version of what I just said. But yeah, I mean, I think, and I feel like also when she's fighting against nobody, this could have looked really silly. And I wouldn't be shocked if some people did find it silly, because anytime anybody's fighting against what we can't see, it can come off as silly. But the music, the direction here by Lee Winnell, who's now done 3 films now, which I've pretty much loved all of. Yes, Insidious Chapter 3. It's my favorite Insidious movie. Crazy, right? Yeah, Insidious Chapter 3, Upgrade, and The Invisible Man. Cannot wait to see what this guy does next. I think his direction is fantastic. So, yeah, Lee Winnell, keep cranking them out, man. You are an excellent writer and now a excellent director. But yeah, the direction here, the acting, the music, the cinematography, the shot selections, the twists, the scares. Well, not the scares, but just kind of, well, I guess there are kinds of scares, but it's not a typical scary movie. There's no jump scares or anything like that, which is great. But the jump scares that are here are really earned, if you want to consider them jump scares. But this is really effective horror filmmaking. Like for instance, when she goes up in the attic crawl space and she takes the paint in the moment and throws it down, and then boom, he's right there. Like, that's an effective jump scare. That works. So excellent stuff all around. The writing, the directing, the acting, the everything. I mean, I don't have any real flaws with the movie. Anything I would say is all just kind of nitpicky stuff. But man, yeah, and as I said, the balancing. You have a great, strong, good man in the movie, and then you have the evil guy. So those balance each other out really well. And yeah, this isn't one I took any notes on. Usually I take notes for movies like this, so I can talk about every little thing. Trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about on here about this. No, I think that's mostly it. But what do you guys think about this movie? What were some of your favorite parts that I brushed over? It's a pretty quick movie, even though it's 2 hours long. When I was watching it, it really does fly by, and everything feels very tight. Like, the pacing is excellent. Like, it never felt like any scene, any moment was unnecessary, overused, overstayed its welcome, any of that. I thought it flowed really, really well, which is just great stuff. You don't want to waste a minute when it comes to film, and this never did. And her revenge at the end, with the surprise, and she steps out of the camera and is like smiling, and his throat is slit, and he's looking over at her like, holy shit, you got me, and she's, all that, so good. And the guy comes in and he's like, I think it sounded like he committed suicide, I guess. But yeah, is she gonna have that kid? Will she have the baby? That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I guess it would just depend on her beliefs. So anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know. Adios.